Hello and welcome to e-GMAT. We will solve question number 34 of OG Verbal 2nd edition by using e-GMAT 3-step process. In the first step, we will understand the meaning of the sentence. In the second, we will evaluate the errors in the sentence, and finally, we will review all the answer choices to get to the correct answer. So let's begin. Lacking information about energy use, people tend to overestimate the amount of energy used by equipment such as lights that are visible and must be turned on and turned off, and underestimate that used by unobtrusive equipment such as water heaters. Now this sentence presents a few facts. It says that people lack information about energy use. Because of this, they overestimate the amount of energy used by visible equipment such as lights, and they underestimate the amount of energy used by unobtrusive equipment such as water heaters. By the way, visible equipment is the equipment that must be turned on and turned off. Now let us evaluate the errors by splitting this sentence into clauses. So here comes the first clause. Lacking information about energy use, people tend to overestimate the amount of energy used by equipment such as lights. Here people is the subject and tend is the verb that is followed by to verb form to overestimate. So together the verb is tend to overestimate. Well, presence of that tells us that we have another clause here that reads that are visible and must be turned on and turned off. Here, that is the subject and are visible and must be turned on and turned off are the verbs. What follows next is another clause where we have this part of verb underestimate. Now, this sentence presents a list where according to the list, people do two things. They tend to overestimate and they tend to underestimate. Now since we have a list here, tend to is understood before underestimate. So the verb in its entirety is tend to underestimate, and this verb takes the same subject people as in the first clause, and this clause reads and underestimate that used by unobtrusive equipment such as water heaters. Now here in this in the underlined portion of the sentence, the phrase that are visible here, that modifies equipment as if we are saying equipment are visible. Now equipment is singular and are is the plural verb. So certainly here the subject does not agree in number with verb. So we have subject verb number agreement error in the sentence. Also, the sentence talks about the amount of energy used by two entities, equipment that are visible and unobtrusive equipment. Now these two elements are logically parallel because both are types of equipment. Grammatically also they are parallel to a certain extent because both are nouns. But notice that they can be made more parallel and precise. The first element can be very easily written as visible equipment to make it absolutely parallel to the second entity, unobtrusive equipment, that lies in the non-underlined portion of the sentence. So this leads to the parallelism error in this sentence. Now let's run the POE to find out what's the correct answer. Well, choice A is not the correct answer as we discussed just now. Choice B repeats the subject verb error as well as the parallelism error as in choice A. Also in choice B, use of it is incorrect. In comparisons, it denotes exactly the same thing as its antecedent. Let's take an example. The match played on Monday drew more audience than it was expected to. Here, it denotes exactly the match played on Monday, and it talks about the match that was played on Monday. But if we say the match played on Monday drew more audience than that played on Sunday, here we are using that to denote another match that is very different from the match played on Monday. Here that denotes the match that was played on Sunday. Similarly, it in this sentence stands for the amount of energy used by equipment that are visible or the visible equipment. So using it in this choice makes the entire sentence illogical. So use of it is not correct. Also, use of when is incorrect in this choice because this again leads to illogical comparison. Well, what do people do? People overestimate amount of energy used by visible equipment. That's our first entity. The second entity is people underestimate amount when used by unobtrusive equipment. Now, when in the second element brings in the timing into picture, which is absolutely illogical, and this makes the this leads to the parallelism error here. So for these reasons, choice B is not the correct answer. Let's take a look at choice C. Well, choice C again has the same parallelism error as in choice A, and it also repeats the errors of it and when as in choice B. So choice C is also not the correct answer. Let's take a look at choice D. Choice D uses the phrase visible equipment, and this takes care of all the errors. We do not have the parallelism error, we do not have the subject verb error anymore, so choice D is the correct answer. Well, we'll still review choice E. This choice repeats the errors of it and when as in choice B, so as we found out, choice D is the correct answer for this sentence. This brings us to the takeaway messages of the sentence. In the questions pertaining to parallelism, we must identify the correct list, and we must make sure that all the entities in that list are grammatically as well as logically parallel. Also, in comparison sentences, when it appears with the second entity, it denotes exactly the same thing as its antecedent. The concepts tested in this sentence have been covered in e-GMAT concepts, Level 1 Subject Verb Agree in Number, Level 1 Parallelism Identify and Correct, and Level 2 Parallelism Comparisons.